everyone. Welcome to our AES New York section panel on 360 and immersive audio. I'm Jeanne Montalvo. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to take a minute to introduce our guests. Sarah Gibble-Laska is the CEO and co-founder of Chapter 4. It's a creative technology and post-production company based in New York City. So as a sound designer and audio post engineer, she's worked on, her work has been featured in Oscar-nominated films, podcasts, immersive content, television, web series, and commercials. Marta Gospodarek is a PhD candidate in the music technology at NYU. Her research interests lie in the intersection of spatial audio, psychoacoustics, acoustics, and sound design applied to the context of virtual and mixed reality. She is a member of NYU Future Reality Lab, where she works as a lead sound designer for VR and AR experiences. She's currently pursuing the Chateaubriand Scholarship at IRCAM in Paris, where she's exploring sound perception in AR environments. And Peter Fedek is a composer, musician, and producer. He is currently pursuing his master's at NYU in music technology with a focus on spatial music composition. He studied music theory and composition at the Juilliard School and Max MSP programming at HarvestWorks. And he is also the senior audio producer at the consulting firm SY Partners, audio producer for civic engagement podcast feature Hindsight, and owner of audio production company Extra Large. Welcome to all my wonderful guests. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So we are going to kind of dive in and start talking about the world beyond stereo audio. So let's just very basically talk, give us a nutshell of kind of like what you're, I know I just read your bios, but in your own words, kind of like what you're working on and what you're specialized in.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Sarah Gibble-Laska, as Jeanne just mentioned. Right now, what we are currently working on, so we are a full service production company that mostly specializes in post-production sound and music for all media. We also do a little bit of color and a little bit of video editing as well, but predominantly sound and music. Right now, we've been doing a lot of podcasts in the quarantine. That's been a big thing. In addition to that, we've been doing some really fun animated projects. And one of the big things is one of the podcasts that I'm just starting to work on right now has just told me that they want to do it in 3D audio, which is often confused with binaural audio. So 3D audio, as I usually think about it, has more of a layer of interactivity. So head tracking, that sort of thing. Whereas binaural is more of a linear concept, right? So you would imagine going from linear to object oriented. So yeah, that's some of the things that we're working on right now, and pretty excited about it.
Hi, my name is Marta Gospodarek. I'm a PhD student at NYU. I'm working with Dr. Agnieszka Rogińska. And currently I'm working on my research at IRCAM, where I'm basically building augmented reality audio system and trying to see how different acoustic rendering methods affect plausibility, which means basically what is needed to get as real and as blended with the environment around us as possible. And before I was doing some design for co-located VR, where we have multiple people in the audience being together and seeing the same thing, kind of a video in film in VR experience, and also working on some immersive theater pieces. And also I did a number of music recordings with Immersive audio group. So that's the things I did.
I'm Peter Fedek. Yeah, I'm currently studying at NYU in the music tech program, grad program. I'm one of the coordinators of the Immersive Audio group. And so right now, I think some of the things that I'm looking at and thinking about between my different jobs and roles is basically taking that kind of next step that Sarah, you just mentioned about the podcasting and bringing it into some sort of immersive space. My main interests, my thesis is going to be on is on spatial music composition, and bringing my hope is that fast and easy production and delivery of these immersive formats become a reality in the very near future. And so I want to kind of I'm starting to think about that now and trying to merge my podcast and production work with the immersive formats and what does that look like. I'm working on some music right now in the Atmos format, trying to capture the soon to be released Atmos compatibility with Apple Music. It's already open in some other channels. I've done work in binaural sound design and binaural post-production. And one of the things that I'm also looking at the consulting group is trying to understand what I, as an audio engineer, can bring to the table in this new realm of what they're calling hybrid work. What does that look like? How do we have a group of people working in one space and having these remote people experience the same or somewhat equivalent rich experience that the people in the room have? And can we use immersive audio formats to kind of transport the remote people into that space? So yeah, that's some of the things that I'm working on.
That's something, I just want to add one thing to that. I unfortunately did not personally have any involvement in this, but one of my business partners was actually, prior to the pandemic, was working on capturing 360 audio for music concerts. So that's something that that is in the works already, which is super exciting, to bring music experiences to people who were not able to be there. So that's very cool that you're working with that.
That's great. Yeah. So the reason that I wanted you guys to kind of discuss in your own words of some of your projects you were working on, because a lot of times when we think of 360 or immersive audio, people automatically think about virtual reality and like the obvious stuff that encompasses immersive audio. But you've all mentioned so many different aspects, and we're going to cover some of those, just specifically even music production, which is really cool. So I guess what is the basic definition of what 3D and immersive audio encompasses? Let's kind of go back to the basics. Any of you?
The definition I always use is basically the technology that allows to position the sound in any direction around the listener. Because I think that's the biggest difference when we think about stereo. We always have this barrier of speakers. It's really hard to get this effect of having something closer to the listener or even behind without this special technology. And here with spatial audio, we can really surround the listener with sounds. And I think that's the most important aspect of this technology.
Great. Well, you guys kind of mentioned some of the different ways that spatial audio is being used, but let's elaborate a little bit about that and tell us more about like one project that you guys are working on, and we'll get a little bit more detailed about each of those projects.
I can start with that. So the project that I just mentioned, I can't speak too much on now for proprietary reasons, and also just because we're really just starting it. But a project that I worked on relatively recently was a really interesting concept that Kira Benzig came out with called Love Seat, and it was a theater piece, but the actors were wearing headsets, and it was being projected onto a virtual space. So they had avatars as well. So it went to the Venice International Film Festival, and so people could log in at a specific time and watch the theater performance as avatars, while the people that were actually in the theater space were able to watch the actors acting, but with headsets on as well, and with the projection of their avatars behind them. So I thought this was a really creative and interesting way to to kind of push the boundaries of theater in general, especially again for accessibility. That's something that I've been thinking a lot about in the past few years, is how can we bring experiences to people who might not otherwise be able to experience them, whether that's through physical limitations or even emotional limitations. So that was something that was really, really fun to work on. I did just the sound design pieces for that. One of my other partners, Kareem, worked on the music for that. But it was a fully collaborative process. My other two business partners also worked on it as well. Two of them actually went to Venice for the theater part of it, while me and my other partner stayed behind. So that was just something that I was really proud to be part of, because for me, that was something I had never done before. I don't come from a theater background. I come from like a film and television and ad space, just sound for picture. So that was, that kind of opened up my eyes just to the possibilities of immersive audio and what actually it can really do.
Turn, Marta.
Yeah, so the last project I worked on and I actually finished recently was, as I mentioned, this multi-audience collocated VR, which then turned into AR experience. And in the end, we did 2D video of it, going back to the traditional medium. And what was special about that, the whole idea was to bring this this experience of being with people that we have to in cinema, right? We go to the cinema because we want to share this experience. We can look at each other, see our reactions. And many times VR right now is just one person. Someone goes in and no one else knows what really was going on inside. So the whole idea was, how can we bring people together with VR? And what we did, we had people wearing headsets sitting in the audience. They could see each other as avatars inside VR, and they could see the action going on in front of them. And they were also part of the scenography in this piece. And we used for that open headphones prototypes from both, because another really important aspect was to allow people to hear each other, because if they have headphones blocking ears, then this gathering is really not working. So we used these headphones, and I also took opportunity to add the speakers, because when you have open headphones, you can use both. You can use spatial audio on headphones, but you can also enhance the sound design with subwoofers and external speakers, which really add so much to the immersion of the experience. And and then this experience turned into AR piece where people could see actors as small avatars on the table. And we could see, so then again, they were together around the table, seeing like a little dwarfs walking. And we used the spatial audio and the subwoofer under the table for that, to get the cinematic sound. And in the end, we shoot a traditional 2D video with a virtual camera guy inside VR, and also to show how many opportunities is here, right? It was all done from one shoot of the actors with the motion capture, and then all of this, different types of mediums could come out of it.
Fascinating. I guess so. I wonder both of those experiences are kind of theater based. I wonder, Peter, if you can elaborate a little bit more on one of your music projects and how that works.
Yeah, I feel humbled to be part of this question right here. The work that I do is not that complex. That is really amazing stuff. I think for the most part, I'm working in the box. I think just because that's just the nature of where we are right now. I'm not going out and doing a lot of field recordings. I'm not doing a lot of collection. What I'm doing is basically just sound design for kind of like what you just identified, Sarah, as being like the binaural experience, because to me, that's the simplest transmission. You know, you can get stereo sound for the most part wherever somebody can hear an MP3, right? So one of the first, I don't want to know if you call it a boundary that I started pushing, but was just developing a a sound design piece to accompany 2D visual that was transmitted over Zoom. And because I felt if in this day and age, if there's any way that you're going to get a good captive audience in numbers, since we're not doing installations really, or we're not going to anywhere you can be immersed by multiple speaker arrays, I thought that was the ticket. And so right after Zoom kind of implemented there's kind of two things that was necessary for it to be relatively successful, which is one, stereo, and two, kind of taking off all the processing that Zoom does. I mean, obviously there's, still some compression going in, but a lot of the noise cancellation and EQing and things can really destroy a binaural sound file, and it ruins the spatialization. So, everything seemed to go great. It was a really successful test. Something changed in the technical back end, and when we went live, it was in mono. And it was a nightmare. But I think, like this is the situation that we're in, and this is as sound designers, the distribution, like I said, is to me one of the most important parts. And I think even though it wasn't successful, it was still a very good learning experience. If this is somewhat possible now, but I think as engineers have to take into all these considerations what it means from end to end, and how do we get there.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up. That was the distribution aspect of it is something that I personally don't always think of and have to be reminded of. And sometimes, when it's in like 0 hour, as is what happened to you, it's really unfortunate. But that was actually something, the podcast that I'm about to start working on. Initially, the thought was to have one world be in stereo, and then when it's just to another world, have that be binaural, so you could really get an effect of that shift. And my partner Kareem brought up a really good point. Like, what if someone's listening to this in their car? That might sound really jarring, or on some platform that is really suboptimal for that. And I think that's a consideration that we need to really pay attention to now more than ever before.
Because I guess, in order for spatial audio and immersive experiences to function, you have to be in the right listening environment. Like, that's part of some of the drawbacks of having it more widespread, correct?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be that sophisticated. Like, really, right. Just headphones would be great.
Of course. A word that gets thrown around a lot is Ambisonics, and I kind of wanted to go into that and dispel some of the myths and questions that some people may have, because you hear that word a lot within the context of immersive audio. So, if someone wants to grab that.
As far as a format, I think, I don't know if Marta and Sarah, you have other thoughts of this, but the way I see it is like, it's one of three formats that we kind of think about when we think about spatial audio. You have object-based audio, which is usually a stereo or mono file that you can either pan in a virtual space, or you can pan around speakers if you're going to have an array. You have channel-based audio, which is any kind of mono channel, stereo channel. It's basically any speaker feed you consider a channel. So in 5.1 audio, you have 6 channels. And then you have this ambisonic, or what they call sound field format. And there's it's in theory a 360-degree sound field around us. That's what the sound field is. And you use a combination of these 3 different kinds of formats depending upon what you're trying to transmit, what your distribution format is. And you have different considerations for how you process or how you work with all these different these 3 basic types of audio.
Right. Yeah, and just to add, to piggyback onto that too, generally when we talk about like ambisonic recordings specifically, like in the actual capturing of it, we're usually talking about using a specific microphone for that, or like an ambisonic mic. And the way that sound is captured is, you want to think about it as like almost like separate shotgun mics in a tetrahedron pattern. So they're able to capture all around. Yep, there it is, actually. Yeah, it just showed up there. So what that does is that they are configured in a way too that you're not going to get any kind of phasing or overlapping. So there's an algorithm that's built into that so that you're meant to hear it as a human actually does, right? And then when you get into the encoding process to change it to B format, that's when it, you can kind of break that down into the 4 channels. But as Peter said, like depending on what your platform is, it depends on what kind of format you're going to be using. I think the 2 most common are AmbiX and Fuma, but those channel orders are different. So, and used for different platforms.
So, I mean, that brings us to my next question is, how are you capturing for a 3D environment? What kind of microphones are you using? What does that typically look like? How do you prepare for a recording in Immersive?
Me, person? Oh,
anyone?
At chapter 4, we have we've used the sound field at SPS 200 and the Ambio before. I personally have used the Ambio, but my partners have used the sound field SPS 200. I like them both. They're both really great. I think for the Lion King project that we worked on, we used the SPS 200. And we positioned that right underneath a 360 camera in the nadir, or like the blind spot, so that it wouldn't be captured by the camera itself. And then we also used like a stereo pair, and then the orchestra was separately mic'd as well. So, but it really
sorry, I'm just going to quickly pause because some of chapter 4's work has been some 360 videos for Broadway. They've done, I believe you said a promo for Hamilton, Aladdin and the Lion King. Is what she just mentioned?
Yeah, and the Hamilton one I should clarify too. That was a capture of them backstage, and we didn't do as much production. Like we did just the production aspect. We didn't do any of the post on that.
Gotcha.
But for the Lion King and for Aladdin, we did, and those were basically just promotional videos meant to draw audiences to the Broadway shows by capturing one of the songs from each one. For the Lion King, it was a little bit more straightforward. Really, really fun to work on. But really just as you would experience it in the theater. For Aladdin, there were actually other animated visuals that gave factoids about the play or the musical itself.
I'm going to play back a few seconds of this. I'm going to preface this by saying that unfortunately, the 360 experience does not work over Zoom. We have tested it a couple of times, but it'll just give you an idea of what it looks like. And I encourage you to go to their site so that you can poke around and move it around so you can hear how the spatialization works in your headphones. So here's a little bit. I'm just going to grab the video here. You can see how it moves around. And when you are on the site, you can hear how the audio is moving when you move the video around. It's very cool. So I encourage you to go check that out because unfortunately we can't demonstrate it over Zoom. So
I should also mention that for that piece specifically, we worked with Alchemy Post Sound, who I just absolutely adore working with, to capture a lot of really great Foley to really bring that piece to life. Honestly, I think Foley is one of the unsung heroes of the sound design world. And it just adds a level of realism that we couldn't have gotten on our own.
Yeah, that's so true. I totally agree that any spatial audio without Foley in any piece, just the immersion is gone.
Yeah.
Anything else to add about capture?
I could maybe just mention some limitations of Ambisonics, because it's really great that because we can capture the whole sphere of sound around the listener, but the problem with Ambisonics is the localization. And with first order Ambisonics, which means that we are using 4 coincident mics in this one mic, we get really a lot of blur. So that works best for kind of, for example, ambiances or more as a background. If we want to get more details, let's say, or better localization, then higher order ambisonics are needed, which means that we would need to have more microphones in this one ambisonic, more capsules in one ambisonics microphone, which are also available, but the production then it's much more complicated because then the channels multiply very fast. And for example, with fourth order, you need 32 capsules to get really decent localization. So usually when you work with ambisonics, it's better to let's say help to use also object audio if you really want to have a very good localization. But of course, it also depends on the context and the piece and what is needed.
I wonder what kind of challenges is posed when you bring in that many microphones into the recording process in terms of phasing and things like that.
I mean, the phasing, it's not a problem because there are like algorithms and coding, which basically you don't work on separate channels. You have the whole bed of these 32 channels, which are then decoded to the format you need. And it's all done, let's say, in the background. You are working, if you want to do any kind of processing, you have to EQ and process the end result of decoding of all of these channels. So that's not a problem. The problem is, of course, that then I mean, first of all, this fourth order ambisonics are really expensive, so not, let's say it's hard to, it's not easy to have it, but also then the session grows very fast if you want to use a lot of layers of that.
You mentioned decoding the audio, so let's talk a little bit about that. So once you've captured everything, how are you decoding the audio? Peter, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on, it really depends on what you're going to, like what format are you processing to. I think for VR experiences, like visual 360 video experiences, that's generally just unless you have some sort of headlocked, like repositional audio field that you're actually attaching to the video, which I should say that like most of the 360 videos I've experienced on YouTube and just in person don't have that. You're just basically running down to either a stereo mix or binaural, like a headphone mix. So usually, again, you're using some sort of processing, you're using some sort of software to output that. In the case of more immersive formats, you're again using some sort of encoding process that will either move all of the combination of whatever of the three types of audio that you're using into the appropriate file format. It's hard to, it's kind of vague because like you can do something like in Ambisonic and encode it for binaural and put it in a pair of headphones. You can do it for a speaker system with as many speakers as you can afford or as many speakers as you can process. You can do it for standard setups like 5.1. And for the most part, you're going to be encoding specifically for each of those platforms. Now, some of the benefits of the newer platforms like Dolby Atmos, Auro 3D, or MPEG-H, which is in particular one of the projects that Sony has worked on. They're now branding it as 360 Reality Audio. Those are, I don't want to say it's not a container, but it's like a file format as a codec that is rendered on the fly. So we as producers don't necessarily, I mean, we can, but we don't have to necessarily make a binaural mix, a stereo mix, a 5.1 mix, a 7.1 mix, a 9 point, whatever, like as many channel counts as you can get. It's really done on the receiver's end. And each one of those formats has different pluses and minuses in terms of, if you need a 5.1 array, it has to be particularly spaced to give good sound field representation. The speakers have to be of a certain volume level. Everything has to be kind of calibrated. So these are just many of the considerations that you kind of have to take into when you're thinking about these things. It's not, I don't have a quick, easy answer for this, unfortunately.
No, that was great. Anything else to add? What about you ladies?
So we have used the sound field surround zone 2, I believe it's called, as an encoder before in past projects. I'm sure there are many different other products out there to use. That's just one that I am remembering that we have used, where we have encoded our ambisonic recordings prior to bringing them into Pro Tools. You're talking, that's what you're asking for, right? Like what we're actually using?
Yeah, just the decoding process and the post process after we've captured.
Yeah, so that basically puts it into a B format, something that is usable that we could then work with. And then from there, as I lightly touched on before, depending on what, and as Peter also mentioned, what your end goal is, that really determines what your channel ordering is going to be, right? So if you were just using like first order Ambisonics, for instance, the AmbiX is WYZX pattern, and FUMA is WXYZ pattern. So some programs use FUMA, some use Ambix. I think Ambix is used by like Facebook, Oculus, YouTube, Samsung VR, I think is another one. But that's why it's really important to know what your end game is when you're going through this entire process. And then when you're ready to export it, a lot of these, there's a lot of plugins. Like we use, what is it called? AudioEase a lot. So we use their 360 pan suite when we're doing these quite often. And, that kind of does the muxing for you, but you can also use IFFmpeg at the very end to mux the audio and the video together. Like there's no one straight answer. It really depends on what your application is going to be. I don't know if I made that more confusing or not.
No, not at all. It sounds great. I mean, if you're mentioning a lot about your end game. I mean, if most people don't have multi-speaker arrays in their, if we're talking about the consumer level, right? They don't have multi-speaker arrays. So let's talk a little bit about headphones and how that works and some of the processes to get those to work in headphones.
Well, I should also mention really quickly too, it also depends on, again, if the story or if your product is going to be linear or if it's going to be truly interactive. So like anytime that we've done projects that are interactive in like the real sense, like you can interact with it, we'll do, like I will maybe do the sound design part in Pro Tools, right? So like I might, if I'm making a composite sound effect, I might end up bouncing my sound effect down into a mono file even that can then be brought into, I don't know if it's pronounced Wise or WWise, but it's basically to be used in like an Unreal Engine so that you truly do have the freedom to move these things around as objects, right? So just to put that out there as well, like some will require an additional step beyond the linear phase that is Pro Tools, Logic, Nuendo, whatever you might use, that requires a little bit more learning and a little bit more work, and sometimes a little bit more coding to get your end result. Yeah, and those are all for headphones too. That's,
Right.
So
go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Go, Peter.
I was just going to make a quick suggestion because I feel like it sounds like if we're trying to get people's feet wet, I think one of the lowest, I don't want to say bars, but like the easiest way to kind of get into this is simply with a binaural render. So if you're, let's say, a musician, or you're a sound designer, or you're someone who's just dabbling, it could be anything. You could be making beats. It doesn't really matter what. If you're looking for some relatively straightforward means, you have, all you really need is a copy of Reaper and what I think they're now DRVR. There's some free plugins over at DRVR that used to be the Sennheiser Ambio plugins that you can use to basically move sounds and object, like as objects in an object format all around your head. And that can just be like the first step to understanding really that putting sounds in that 360 sphere that's then simply decoded to your ears. And you don't have to worry too much about all the speaker arrays and the setups and everything. That's kind of where I started. Just some of those plugins are, I think they're called the Ambi Micro, and yeah, there's just another. I also use the DRVR Pro, which has the panning option for objects to get things into space. I mean, you don't even, to be honest, with this kind of setup, you don't even need the microphone. You don't even need an ambisonic microphone. You can just take some stereo or mono files, kind of like what Sarah was saying, and just start, putting a sound and spinning it around your head and see where that feels like right or wrong. And, do you want to, when you do a traditional mix, you got like the bass drum and the bass up front. Is that now where you want to put it? You want to spread the band out like they're on a sound stage in front of you, because you can do all that with relatively little financial investment. So I think if you are an engineer looking to get into this game or this realm, I think that's a good place to start. Just get a few free plugins from DRVR and Reaper, and you got it.
That's an excellent point.
I should also mention on that, I believe the AudioEase, the 360 Pan Suite, I know at least they have a free Pro Tools template that you can download. I have used it. It is great. And they even very graciously in the comments section of some of the channels, they'll put this is what this is used for. So it's a really good learning tutorial. And similarly, you can, if you have picture that let's say someone tells you they have a short film and they want to make it a 360 instead, and they've maybe captured some of it already in 360. You can also get like a preview of the footage. It's not always the most clear picture, but you can, as Peter said, move stuff around, figure out how that sounds in the space, because at least sound designing for a 360 environment, I think requires a lot more sensitivity, because you don't have this flat space anymore. It's everywhere, and you have to keep in mind that people get overwhelmed sometimes and or distracted. So those are all considerations to take. But yeah, AudioEase I think has a free. I think the plugin is free as well. I think maybe wrong on that.
I think that's an excellent point. Let's talk a little bit more about the sound design. What kind of thought process you're going into in designing for a 360 space? I mean, people do tend to get overwhelmed. So like let's talk, I mean, especially Martha, you said you were working a lot in the intersectionality of psychoacoustics and acoustics, and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so what Sarah said, I think it's a great point about the attention of the listener. So it's really easy to overwhelm. And I think the first consideration is to think, what is the story? How do we want to enhance this storytelling? What is the most important aspect? And then we should decide what is the most important sounds which should be specialized, what can be in the background. And I think that's actually adds another layer of expression to the sound engineer, because then we have a new tool in which we can also tell the story and highlight some elements which are important or hide them in the background. And then there is a lot of play about the distance, because now we are in 3Ds and we also can use this high and low space. And also another consideration is that binaural technology doesn't work. I mean, it sometimes doesn't work great, especially if it comes to the high and low planes. It's just the problem with the HRTFs. We didn't talk about that, but binaural technology is based on the spectral cues that are imposed on the sound to reproduce the way we hear the sound in the environment. And right now we are able to hear the spectral cues with the headphones. And the thing is that every one of us has different ears. And to get the spectral cues perfectly, we should actually measure the ears. But of course, none of the plugins does that. So they use some kind of averaged ears, which are maybe better for some people and worse for other people if they are very different from the model. And yeah, so here we can see how the sound is actually affected by the shape of our pinna. So every sound which is coming to the ear is reflecting, bouncing off these little curves of our ears. And the spectral content is changing because of that. And the spectral cues there are really very subtle changes between every one of us. And so that's why we also have to keep in mind that some of the things we might hear during the mix might be heard different by the people later when the sound is reproduced, and especially it comes to the up and down planes, but also visuals helps a lot, because if we have this visual cue that we can easily assign to the sound, then our brain is much is tricked much easier to believe in it.
Right. So what kind of, I mean, when we kind of talk about the future of immersive audio, like what kind of technologies are you seeing with spatial audio now? I know, Sarah, you briefly mentioned podcasts and even especially in COVID, these virtual tours, real estate tours.
Yeah, we actually did over the past year, we did a virtual tour of the Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner's art studio, which is part of their museum, that was like a truly interactive piece. So we used the Unreal Engine for that. And that was a very cool way to not only keep businesses open, but to, keep exposing people to art in an interesting way. And to that note too, in terms of what else is on the horizon, I mean, this is already here, but I'm really excited about therapeutic applications for 3D audio, 360 sound. Like, I think the applications for people that have PTSD, for people that have dementia, for training videos, so putting people in actual real situations so that they're better prepared depending on what their occupation is. I think the possibilities for that are huge. And virtual tourism also is just very fun, I personally think.
Yes. And Marta, Peter, anything like you guys are, I know, are kind of immersed in the, no pun intended, the research. Where do you see this going?
So I think the future is augmented reality. We just wait for the times when we all will have glasses and we'll be seeing, instead of looking in the small smartphones, which actually it's really not very comfortable if you think about that, where we will have everything displayed in front of our ears. And I think that there is a lot of research which needs to be done in terms of spatial audio in augmented reality. Because it brings much bigger challenges than designing the sounds for virtual reality, because here we have these visual cues and real environment, which brings very certain expectations. When we see the room, we know how it should sound. Then we hear someone talking in this room, and we have even bigger, more detailed expectation of the sound that so then when we want to impose on this real environment some virtual object, then we have to understand what the room look like, what are the materials it is built from, to be able to feed it back to the algorithm to impose this acoustics on our sound so that it can blend seamlessly. And here, actually, the research is still going. There are different approaches tested, how to use 360 cameras to get this. Some smartphones right now has the option to get the size of the room cubature and which scans the room. Some other take the impulse response just from very short excerpts of audio recording from the microphone of the device. And yeah, it's still in work, and I'm really interested how it will progress.
Right. And Peter?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with both of you, actually. I think it's AR is kind of you're in the place and the sound's adjusting to you. I think that the technology will hopefully soon emerge. I think that to me, it's about like a co-location situation. Like, how do you bring either the listener into the environment or the environment to the listener? And I think Sarah kind of highlighted that with like these tours. I think, like I was mentioning with the workspaces, I think that as the technology improves and as we have these like devices, I'm going to actually show my screen real quick because I want to highlight one of the mics that I had been using, in particular the Zilia mic, which, we've been talking about how complex these mics are in terms of capturing and the amount of channel count that you get. But with the Zilia, a lot of that stuff is kind of baked in through algorithms and technologies, and you can do what they call beamforming with these mics as well. So, you're capturing a 360 sphere around the microphone, but then using phase cancellation, you can actually kind of target objects that are around inside that sphere. And so one of the things that I had been doing just in my day job as like a kind of a let's see how it goes is using the Zilia on a meeting table and just seeing like, can I capture with like a multi-point phase, not a multi-point beamforming all the different people in the room quickly and easily. And so that I'm not ending up with literally 19 channels of audio, which is normally what the Zilia would put out, and just ending up with like, let's say there's 7 people, 7 channels of audio. And could I use that along with maybe Zoom and put that sphere of people into the headphones of everybody that's watching the Zoom on the other side? So now you're spatializing that audio and you're able to hear more like you would if you were in the room. And I see that as like one of the potential use cases. I also think that when we do kind of all come out of our shells and come out of this pandemic situation and we want to go back into the real world, we want to kind of experience it in a way that is richer than it may have been in the past. And when I visited a place like Meow Wolf, which is this interactive art, it's in Santa Fe. It's I don't know what you call it. It's like an art experience. It's not a museum because you're like crawling through walls and like hearing things around you and touching things. It's all very interactive. I feel like that is what's going to draw people into the space. It's also, it is the other side of that. You're bringing the location to the person, but you're also putting the person in the space. And to me, I see the benefits of that rich environment as the draw for everybody once we do finally get out of our houses.
It's a very creative application. Go ahead, Mark.
I just wanted to add to that. Also, I think that the future of spatial audio is what Peter said and mentioned about the conferences, in general collaboration between people, because right now in NYU we are working on the holodeck big round, which is basically focused on creating this shared space where people can work together but from separate physical spaces. And the use cases of that are amazing for, I don't know, many medical education even collaboration between musicians. We also did couple concerts where we were trying to bring musicians from different physical spaces and also dancers into one concert hall. And everyone was streamed real life from different rooms around the campus, but also from other countries. And we were mixing them all together in one concert hall at NYU. And I think that's also the future, where we will be able to seamlessly work together, even though we are in completely different spaces.
Was that very challenging I'm just thinking of latency issues, especially with the dancers having to synchronize with each other. That sounds really, sounds like that was probably very challenging.
Yes, I mean, one thing is that we are lucky to have a very fast internet connection at NYU, which is between, it's a special connection. It's not the usual Wi-Fi, so that was easy. But also for some pieces, for people from other countries, we had to adjust the music itself. So of course you cannot use any fast piece, right? So we have to think about all of these considerations and see how people can really react. And so there is still, again, it's still not solved yet. I think there is still a lot of things to be done, but it's great to see the beginning of it.
Yeah, for sure.
All of this is very eye-opening. It's very cool to kind of consider, I mean, especially then since we've all been stuck at home with the pandemic, to kind of consider some applications to get people a more in-person experience with this kind of audio, as opposed to thinking of it as the traditional, more experimental. So I think we'll see a lot more applications of this going forward. I'm just going to go pop through some of the questions here. Marta, you had mentioned some open headphones that you used earlier. Can you let us know which headphones you used?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, they are not on market. There were only prototypes, and basically they had transducers behind the ears, or like mounted, shooting into the ear from the front, something similar to Bose glasses. If you're familiar with this, the Bose glasses, which has the speakers built into the frames. But right now for my research, where I need open headphones, I'm using AKG K1000, which unfortunately are not manufactured anymore, but these are amazing. I mean, I hope they will start again building them, because the quality is great and they are fully open, so you can hear the sounds from the environment without any occlusion.
Nice. There was a question from Lillian Correa. Do you have a book to recommend to those who are starting to learn about immersive audio?
Yes, exactly.
Is that Rajinska's book?
Oh, it's not coming up.
It's the
immersive sound book. Yeah. It's the immersive sound. Oh, that's not helpful. Okay, hold on.
What's the title of it?
It's the immersive sound. Immersive sound: the art and science of binaural and multi-channel audio. This is like here. This is the book. This is.
Oh, wonderful!
I have to shout it out. Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, there's probably others, but this is what I use.
All right. Were there any other questions? If you have other questions, pop them into the Facebook feed. We have a few more minutes here. I had a question about the mic here, but it looks like we went over it, the Zilia mic. Very cool. I guess, is there anything else you think that we have missed that you guys want to talk about? Because we have a few more minutes here. A fun anecdote about working on any specific project?
Actually, I had one more application that we thought of would be really fun, to have a silent disco when everyone has the same beat, but all of the people are wearing headphones, and you can adjust the rest of the music to your taste. and it's in spatial audio, so you can still have the direction of things around you, and also of course of the music that is playing, but basically everyone is in their own perfect music world.
Yeah, we glossed over the video game. We didn't really discuss that. It seems like video games are getting pretty intense with their immersive kind of virtual reality. Does anybody want to quickly tackle a little bit of that?
I have never worked on a video game, but I can say that actually, this would be another really great place to start learning if you wanted to get into more object-oriented sound design. I forget the name of them. It's the WY's program, and it's by Audio Kinetic, I think is who does it. Yeah, Audio Kinetic. They have a free course that you can go online, and you basically go through each level of the course, and it starts with just, very simply organizing your sounds in a meaningful way for that platform, and then how to actually utilize them in a fake game. And then, the next levels go on to music, which gets a little bit more involved from a coding aspect, and then mixing as well. And then at the end, if you want, you can get certified in it, which does cost money, but you don't have to. So if you're looking to learn more about that, that's a great it's a great way to get your feet wet.
That's great.
I would also.
It seems like there's quite a few little tools that you can use to kind of dig in and learn more about it.
Yeah, and the community is pretty open too. Like, there's a lot of Facebook groups, and I find that the immersive community is very, willing to share. Whereas, sometimes in other areas of our industry, people are a little bit more secretive about their processes, and I have not found that to be the case at all, because we're all still kind of learning together in some aspects. So it makes for, I think, a really collaborative community. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Peter, you were going to say?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, if you are looking to hear just some of things out there, in particular, I wanted to show this screen too. This is the kind of the current state of where things are with music in terms of spatial music. You don't need a massive, that was one of the other things I meant to say about the future, is that the speaker arrays and systems are getting better for reproducing spatial audio in the home. And so there's some services and products out there that are already available to you for relatively low cost. I mean, you can do it with a pair of headphones, like the AirPod Pros, the Sonys, the Samsungs. They all have spatial audio with head tracking, or they have some of these have head tracking. Some of them, it depends upon what you're listening to and how. But the Amazon Echo Studio is this guy right here is like a 5-speaker array built into a box that does pretty good spatial audio in the home. This one does too. This is the Apple HomePod. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but these services over here that you see, Amazon Music, the Apple Music one is actually forthcoming. They made an announcement, but it hasn't come out yet. But Tidal, Nugs, and Deezer and Amazon Music all have right now spatial music formats. So beyond stereo formats that you can go listen to. Just check out, subscribe to one of these and check out some playlists, and you can hear the things over your headphones spinning around your head. It's pretty cool stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that slide, Peter. Well, I think we gave everybody a quick nutshell version of the immersive audio environments. I want to thank each of my guests for joining us today, and all of you online for joining us as well. We will be coming back with another presentation on June 16th at 3 p.m. Sound design and post mixing moderated by Jenna Emmons with Eli Janney, and James Krieger. So make sure you are here for that. Thanks again. And if you have more questions, I'm sure our guests will be more than happy to answer them. So feel free to reach out to them on all of the socials. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.